I'm selling a service I've never performed to total strangers with no oversight, no safety net, and no guarantee that anything will work. But it's the only plan I have for escaping the future assigned to me by society. But I'm working through it slowly, with a lifetime of preparation on the one hand and sheer audacity on the other. If this works, I'll finally have something to show for all the sacrifices I've made. And if it doesn't, at least it'll still bring me one step closer to success. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I have all the answers or that I'm some sort of business guru or savant. The truth is that I'm just determined to make something of myself. And I thought it might be beneficial for future founders and builders to hear the perspective of someone who's in the same boat or maybe only a step or two ahead of them, instead of just hearing from people who are making content with the backing of $1 million production team who aren't actively going through those beginner struggles anymore. So this is week 3 of building a business from zero. I'm documenting the real problems and what I'm doing to solve them in real time. Hopefully this will be both informative and encouraging to other new entrepreneurs. And this all started because I recently asked myself the question, why can I not get ahead? Why is it that I feel smarter, more competent, and more qualified than the people I work for, but I just can't get my own thing started? That led to me seriously analyzing my situation and trying to figure out what exactly are the obstacles keeping me in place. I work hard, I'm good at problem solving and at developing systems and making things more efficient. So I think that once I get some traction, I'll be able to figure the rest out. It's just getting started that's the hard part. Okay, so if getting started is the bottleneck, what has the lowest barrier to entry? So I went to ChatGPT, wrote out my experience, what I liked, what I didn't like, my strengths and weaknesses, and asked for a diagnosis. One crucial detail is that over the last few months, I've been studying successful people, and I noticed that a lot of them don't actually start with a major product so much as they facilitate the operations for someone else. So for example, they connect a buyer and a seller, or put talent in touch with employees, or whatever. Basically connecting distribution and demand, and getting paid for coordinating the exchange rather than creating the thing itself. So an agency of some sort. That struck a chord with me because my background is in sales, but the last year or so I've been a project manager. My whole job is basically coordinating subcontractors for jobs that our company was hired to do by someone else. So I thought, okay, I can do something like that. That's basically all an agency is. You're connecting people and orchestrating the deals between them. Of all the options AI gave me, only one stood out as viable, and that was truck dispatching, which I never heard of before, but it sounded interesting. So I did some research, found out that it was in fact a real thing, but also not a super saturated market, which was good. I found a guy who was making good content, selling a course, and I made the investment and got started. The first few weeks was getting all the back-end stuff set up, so systems, legal entities, all the planning nonsense that goes into it. Made a logo, started running ads, cold called, booked some appointments. What's intimidating about that though is that it's a totally new industry, but I'm cold calling and running sales pitches for a service that I have zero experience in, asking for money from people without the certainty that I can even produce bare minimum results, and I don't have any experience to draw on to close that deal. So there's a lot of internal resistance there, but you have to hide that. Otherwise, you're not going to make the sale. So the plan is that I basically have to talk to enough people so that I can start closing deals. Sales is just a numbers game, and you've got to get that volume. There's a percentage of people out there who will say yes to your offer and to you, but you have to find them. Then I already knew that the first few might fall through the cracks because I have no systems in place and I don't know what I'm doing. So I have to keep enough coming in the door to onboard them. Then I have to keep enough of those people coming in to get past the free trial period, which would be where I would be experimenting and actually learning how to do the job and learning the skill, which I feel okay about doing because I'm not charging them. Hopefully by that point, I can retain enough of them to recoup my initial investment and have enough cash flow to quit my job. Because, oh, by the way, I still have to do all this while working. Stuff like this is why people choose to work regular jobs. Most won't even take the first step. They like to read business books and watch videos and daydream about success, but they won't take the risk of spending money, setting up an LLC, or making those first few cold calls. So I consider it a win, personally, that I'm at least at that point. I chose to look at the situation basically the same as I would if I was learning a martial art or an instrument. First few sparring sessions or the first few songs are gonna suck. So it's okay if this does too. But I know that if I break things down into the smallest components I can handle, there's no reason I can't do this. I've worked hard and solved problems for other people my whole career, and the same skills apply to these slightly different obstacles. If no one says yes to the cold call, well, I can figure out why and learn to overcome those objections. If they get to the video call but don't close, again, I can figure out what's making them say no and find a way around it. They may say yes, but then flake out and not sign the contract. Okay, why? Where's the friction point in my process and how can I remove it? Maybe we get started and I'm in over my head. Cool, well, that's how I would be at any new job, but I've always gotten my role down within about a month or so. And I figure if each client can stay on for 2 weeks, then I just need 2 people to sign up before I know what I'm doing. There's only so many calls I have to make before someone says yes, and it's the same for the rest of that process, which means there's a definite limit to how many times I have to fail before I win. And the hard part is that I don't know what that number is. So just to make it easier on myself, I just picked a super high number and told myself, hey, I have to make 10,000 cold calls before I have a successful business. And it is what it is. So if I want to quit this, I can, but not until I have 10,000 calls recorded on my spreadsheet. And if I get to 10,000 calls and I still somehow haven't gotten any closer to making a bare minimum income or reaching any of the metrics that I'm after, well, then maybe it's not for me. But until I make 10,000 calls, I'm going to chalk every failure up to the fact that I just haven't hit that magic number yet. Of course, if I'm persistent that long, I probably still won't quit because of the sunk cost fallacy, plus the fact that I'll have established the habit of working on this every day. But that's the long-term thinking. How do you actually deal with the uncertainty, insecurity, and discomfort today on a tangibly practical level? Well, I definitely don't have all the answers, as I said, but I did get past some of the initial process that has undoubtedly pruned away most of my competition. Lesson 1 is letting the offer speak for itself. I'm not pitching myself, I'm selling the fact that I'll work for free, so there's zero risk in deciding if I'm a good fit or not. Alex Hormozi talks about how when you don't have any credibility, the easiest way to sell your offer is just to give it away for free. And when you confidently present a good offer and just let it speak for itself, hardly anyone asks for more, which is not something I expected, to be honest. I figured people would grill me, but they don't. They just assume that you know what you're doing. Lesson 2 is saying less, not more. Since I really don't know how anyone's going to argue with me and push back, I'm kind of forced to just say less. So instead of going on and on about how amazing I am and all the experience I can bring to the table and all the stuff that I have, which, because I don't, I sell and negotiate from a totally different place. So what I thought of as a constraint actually became a superpower because it showed me how to be direct and how to sit in the uncomfortable silence that falls after I ask for anything, which takes me to lesson number 3, which is to solve problems as they appear instead of overthinking. It's much better to lose a sale because you didn't know how to answer a question than it is to never get on the phone because you didn't want to talk to anyone until you had all the answers. The first way, you can immediately brainstorm and find a solution and just be ready for that question from now on and forever because the pain of that failure was the best teacher. Versus the second option where it ends up staying theory forever. And that's lesson number 4, being fearless. Right before I started this business, I was inspired by, of all things, the new Tron movie. I didn't expect it to be inspirational. I thought it'd just be like a fun, movie to watch at the theaters, but there's a scene in it where the AI robot says that since he's fearless, that makes him powerful. And it got me thinking, what would I do if fear was never a factor? What if my fear response was regulated to the level of prudent caution? So basically, I wasn't doing anything stupid. I was being careful, but that was it. And it didn't stop me from taking necessary action, didn't slow me down in the heat of battle, and didn't create any unconscious resistance that made me want to jump ship as soon as the going got tough. Last year, I had a series of traumatic life events that left me mentally and emotionally checked out, disassociated. At first, I thought it was a curse because it's been a year since I've really felt anything good. But then I realized it gave me a certain amount of power because there's also a very low limit to how much I can feel in a negative capacity as well. No joy, but also very little fear. I can't really feel warmth from others, but it also doesn't really bother me if they're angry, which is different from me. I usually care a lot. I'm very sympathetic, I'm very empathetic, and I can be a little bit sensitive to other people's moods, which has its place, but it can also be a weakness that is exploited pretty easily. So in other words, I'm able to act rationally instead of emotionally. Now, I sincerely hope that nothing like that ever happens to you. However, I do hope you learn to see the hand you're dealt with clearly so that you can play it as effectively as possible. And it's funny because once I got over that imposter syndrome, I found that the competition is actually really low. Sure, I don't have a clue what I'm doing, but neither does anyone else. And now I don't care to fail because nothing really bothered me, which kind of became a bit of a superpower. The clients I talk to tell me that the dispatchers they've hired before are not only incompetent, but they don't make any real effort to improve. They're lazy, they don't communicate, they take shortcuts, they put their clients at legal and financial risk. And if those guys are out there doing this job and I could do better, then I think it's worth getting past the early growing pains, which is another example of having that silver lining to everything. I was frustrated that in the adult world, no one seems to know what the heck they're doing. But that made me realize there's no reason I can't start a business just because I'm also lost in the sauce. Because when I look around, the competition isn't any better off. They just started and didn't stop, and maybe they should have. I can learn the technical stuff and improve it as I go. Give me 6 months of steady work and I'll bet I'll be getting better results than 80% of the industry. The only thing standing between me in that position is how much discomfort I'm willing to endure. And I don't know about you, but I'm not happy with the way my life has gone to begin with. If I don't suffer building a business, I'm gonna suffer working for someone else. So you pick your poison. But that's all I have for today. Thank you guys so much for listening. Good luck. I will see you soon.